Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is looking at transactional relationships or relationships where there is, I don't know if I'd say an unspoken agreement. Maybe the people are very open about their expectations in that relationship, but I'm speaking about personal romantic types of relationships, and I'm using romantic very loosely. And each person is there to provide something to the other person. Now, this differs from romantic relationships in the true sense of like that are based on love, because in those relationships, love does not keep books, does not keep track of like, okay, I did this, now you got to do that. Whereas even in this day and age, you can have a transactional relationship simply by two people going out to dinner. Now, I'm going to be using heterosexual relationship examples because I think that the male-female dynamic better illustrates this in terms of like the expectations of the man versus the woman. So, for instance, the man pays for an expensive dinner, and then the woman says, okay, well, I guess I'm going to have to put out. Now, of course, I understand that women may enjoy sex, but there still can be this sense of obligation when one person is shelling out the money. And, these days, the woman can definitely be the one who has the money, and she's looking for the man to provide the sex, because in those cases, it's like, I would say in a lot of those cases, the woman is probably older than the man. And so she's looking for a young man, and maybe she feels like a younger man would never be attracted to her unless, there was something in it for him other than sex. So sometimes that's why I said sugar daddies, but it could be sugar mamas for sure. So I think it's a very interesting issue to explore astrologically. And so I'm just going to go through this list that I have compiled here. The first thing I want to say is that not all transactional relationships are bad as far as I'm concerned. And I just want to reiterate that I'm talking about romantic relationships here, not relationships, transactional relationships or business dealings. So that's like a totally different thing. I'm talking about within the context of romantic partnerships. And it's confusing when I use the word romantic because it implies that there actually is romance. Sometimes you will have one or both parties who are very no nonsense in life, and maybe they're so practical that they look at getting involved with another person as a means to an end. Maybe they want to start a family and they know that they need another person to do that. Maybe they want to combine resources, and they figure, if I live alone, I'm going to be paying all of my rent or all of my mortgage. And, if I find a compatible person, we can share the cost of housing, we can share all of our expenses, and we can also, so we're going to pool our resources together. And so we can even, who knows, maybe we'll build a business together. And so you see that partnership in a very pragmatic way. So that kind of thing, if both people are on board with that, I don't see a problem with it. Some people, they really want a family, but they know that they need a partner to do that, or they want to have a partner. But they may not be madly in love with that other person. It's simply that they get along. They're on the same page. They, you know what I mean? They see life in the same way. So that's fine as far as I'm concerned. The problem is when a person goes into this and then their feelings change. And they may not even realize right off the bat that they really were seeking love. It may take a while for them to figure that out. And it can be very painful. I mean, even I'll give the example, I don't think it's really, 100% what I would say is a necessarily a great example, but it does happen. And I do think it happens a lot with women who are putting out sexually in order to get a man to, um, I don't know if you'd say fall in love with them, but want to be in a permanent relationship with them. Now, in that case, they may even convince themselves, hey, I'm a liberated woman and I enjoy sex. But then something happens along the way where they feel a sense of emptiness. Maybe it's like they have sex and the man, leaves. He can't wait to get out the door. Or if, she's at his place, he has some excuse why she needs to leave. And she may start to feel used. She may start to feel rejected, that like she's only good for that, and he's not interested in her in a holistic way. And it was a transactional relationship. Any kind of like sex with friends with benefits types of situation is transactional. Each person claims to want sex, and you could say they're using one another to achieve that. But sometimes a person develops emotional attachment towards that other person, and that's where it can get messy. So that's why it's a little bit different than in the business world, because you're not expecting anything other than, just cold hard cash or whatever, you provide services, I give you the money, that kind of thing. Okay, so I'm going to start talking about some of the placements. Now, first of all, I'm just going to talk about Capricorn, sun signs, and ascendants. The motto of Capricorn is I use. And by the way, I just want to make it clear that when I talk about astrological characteristics in general, like the signs and what they tend to do, their attitudes, it goes without saying that there are outliers, there are other factors that kind of mitigate certain characteristics. So, it just is a little bit tedious when people say, oh, I'm not like that and I'm a Capricorn and blah, 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 or whatever. That you don't have to even go there, because I totally know that. But we have to be able to talk in generalities and generalize different signs, which I would call the archetypes, the archetypal patterns for each sign, because they're templates. They each sign symbolizes certain characteristics, and that's what makes them distinct from other signs. And Capricorn is a sign, it's the sign of the mountain goat, or the symbol is the mountain goat. The mountain goat is always climbing, higher and higher. And so Capricorn people tend to be ambitious because they're trying to improve their status in life. And so, when you think about somebody who is trying to better themselves, and I was going to use the word better themselves or self-improvement, things like that, but you can construe that in different ways. It doesn't have to be materially. It could be like, for instance, I am a Sagittarian, and Sagittarius is associated with self-growth, but it's more of the spiritual, philosophical variety. With Capricorn being an earth sign and ruling the 10th house of career, it's going to be more of their status in society and their reputation, how they are, viewed by other people and classified. Is this person successful in the definition that the world gives to people? And by the way, some of my opinions are informed by my observation of people that I have known personally that are of the various signs. And I classify them that way because I have the moon in Virgo, so I tend to classify people intuitively into different, and I like to observe, characteristics in people's behavior and attitudes. So with people the reason I'm specifying Capricorn, Sun, and Ascendant is because both of these I feel can reflect the person's personality at different phases of life. I think the Ascendant for the first 30 and then beyond the Sun. But they can be present, either one can be present to some degree all the person's life. And such a person may really feel as if other people are there to help them get ahead. And if somebody isn't, there, it doesn't have that kind of potential, they may discard such a person at a certain time. And who knows, maybe the person who helps them get ahead at some point can't do so, and maybe they get discarded. And the reason I want to put it out there like that is that this is what we talk about when we talk about using another person, is that the person is being viewed as, being valuable for what they can provide, maybe we could say materially or through connections that allow that other person to gain materially, in other words. So I think there can be a scheming quality to Capricorn. Oh, and I said, I guess I put, I think I added that later, the Sun and Ascendant, because also definitely Venus and Capricorn, because Venus is, in terms of relationships, you could even include the moon, I suppose. And that would have an emotional component though too, where the person, that's why I didn't really want to include the moon, because I think that in terms of scheming, I think that would just be like the person that you might feel emotionally connected to. So I'm going to leave that out. But with Venus and Capricorn, the person may have a tendency to want to form relationships with somebody. For instance, with Venus and Capricorn, it could be that the person is attracted to older partners. And the reason that an older partner is significant is because they tend to be more established materially, professionally, materially. And also this can show up as Saturn in the 7th house, because Venus rules the 7th in astrology in the sign of Libra, and the 7th being the house of relationships, and Saturn being the ruler of Capricorn. Of course, Saturn is a co-ruler of Aquarius, but we're talking about the qualities that Capricorn represents. So let me just talk about Saturn in the 7th. Some of these things are kind of interchangeable, but there can be, subtle differences. So Saturn in the 7th house can be someone who sometimes even marries very early to get out of a bad family situation, kind of escape a bad family situation. So the relationship can be based on maybe the partner is older. Again, I think we will tend to see an older man and a younger woman. And well, I would assume that the woman is attractive to that man at least. And so and maybe even, providing that sort of ego boost, like bagged this younger woman. I'm such a stud. I'm such a desirable older man. Um, and this is not to say that all of these May December romances are just, tit for tat. You know, he's using her for, um, her sexual appeal, and she's using him for his wallet. No, I wouldn't say that is true across the board, but there could be some of that, and sometimes the person may not even understand this fully. They might even think, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I think that there are definite times when someone is seeking out another person because they provide some kind of financial stability for them. Maybe even, like, let's say there's a young woman and she was a teenage mother and she has no resources. She has no personal resources, and I'm not even saying she's underage. She might be 18 years old or 19 years old, and her family is like, no, you made your bed, you have to lay in it, pardon the pun. And so an older man can be very appealing because it's almost like her savior in a sense. So maybe in certain circumstances, she can learn to love him. Who knows? But and maybe the man isn't always just. Maybe he has that kind of a rescuer complex where he just wants to nurture somebody, and it's not just because he's looking for sex primarily. So transactional relationships, like I said, they don't have to be all kind of sketchy types or suspect types of relationships. Maybe there's like a noble reason for it at times, but they still can be kind of transactional more than love. Um, Another thing that we can see, one thing that I want to say about Venus and Capricorn, there's a saying, something to the effect of, it's just as easy to fall in love with a rich man as a poor man. Something to that effect. And the meaning is, um, I guess the meaning is, why should I fall in love with a poor man? Why not just fall in love with a rich man? Because then I'll also get the money. Because somebody is wealthy doesn't mean that they can't also be lovable. And that's a rather cynical take on things because it's totally rejecting somebody based on how much money they earn. And I think with Venus and Capricorn, this can be a real problem where the person is looking, okay, what are your credentials? They might not say it that way. Some men complain that women will kind of ask, when they're in that early phase of just getting to know the other person, where they kind of ask questions where the man can tell that they're trying to kind of suss out how much money the man makes, trying to figure out what their yearly salary is. That's something that a Venus and Capricorn person would do. And who knows? Yeah, maybe they would be very conniving and do it in a stealthy, low key manner. But maybe there might be just as many Venus and Capricorn types or Sun and Capricorn, Capricorn rising types who might just tell it like it is or just keep it real and say, and ask the questions point blank because they don't see a problem with it. They think that it's perfectly logical that they would want to know what type of job you have or profession. And there might be, and this would be like, I would say, especially if the Venus and Capricorn person is already established themselves, where they might kind of like take inventory of that person. And if that person isn't necessarily already successful, they might get a feel for, do they have the potential to get there? Maybe I will give this person a chance because they seem like they have a lot of potential. And they may be 100% right. I'm thinking of somebody that I know who was married to another person I know. I know both of them. And they are both earth signs. And the woman is a Capricorn, and, she was trying to help her husband, kind of like get into another line of work. He was doing something that was more what we would call a job than a profession, just because it was kind of like a working class type of a situation. And, in other words, he had to go back to school, I think, and get training. But he did eventually get at least one job, maybe more jobs, where he had more opportunity to advance and make more money and yada yada. Not that that's the meaning of life, but he actually benefited from her guidance because now he's retired. And who knows, if he was still doing his old job, he might still be doing it. Because it's not that kind of work that you just have all these benefits and blah, blah, blah. So, but they're no longer married, because that isn't going to guarantee that the people are going to be compatible. But there's like kind of a mentorship with the sign of Capricorn. So yes, I think it can, this could be the person who wants to help. Part of the transaction, it allows that Capricorn person, in some cases, to be that mentor, to be the teacher or the example of the authority figure. Okay. And that doesn't have to be creepy like a parent-child relationship like we're talking about with somebody who's older and somebody who's younger. But it can be something where it's not necessarily on an equal footing. So eventually the relationship may dissolve because of that. So sometimes you see that with the May-December relationship where the older man, he wants to be that mentor. Yeah, maybe there is a little bit of that hint of wanting to be in control of the situation. And yeah, maybe, his wife is young and attractive, and that makes him feel like he's young and attractive, and, that he's a desirable older man, or that he's successful when it comes to that. But there might be other factors that are informing this. And then also, like I said, Venus and Capricorn and some of these things can be on the end. A lot of times can be like the person who is using another person in that way. And then I put here Jupiter in the 7th house. And because of the nature of the planet Jupiter, it is the great benefic, it's called. I think that Jupiter is a very kind of above board type of an influence, very moral. I would say that maybe if Saturn were in the seventh and not, it doesn't have to be in conjunction, but along with Jupiter in that seventh house, that might be where you see some of the more of the using qualities because of Saturn more than Jupiter, because Jupiter simply can mean marrying somebody with money. And just because somebody marries somebody with money doesn't mean that they are cold and calculating and trying to, marry for money. Okay? But the interesting thing about Jupiter in the seventh house is that it can open up that person's life. It's like after they get married, their life expands because their partner opens up a whole new world to them and for them. And part of that can be that, let's say if you marry somebody who has a good amount of money, they may like fund your travel, and you can see more of the world, and you can just gain like a broader perspective on life. That's really what Jupiter specializes in. And yes, it can kind of make you jump up in terms of your social standing status, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is just this complete using type of situation. I just wanted to include that because I think that can definitely be a case. Now, I mentioned a couple of planets in the eighth house, namely Venus and Jupiter. Since I'm already talking about Jupiter in the seventh, Jupiter in the eighth can be benefiting from other people's money. I especially see this in, I'm thinking about, like, for instance, getting, eighth house can be like inheritances. So a young woman marries an older man. Like I was thinking of I am thinking of, what's her name? The one who passed away tragically. Anna Nicole Smith. I really should do her chart to see if she has a planet like Jupiter in the eighth or Venus in the eighth house, because she married a very elderly man. I don't know what their age difference was, but he was very wealthy. And I think there was like some kind of battle because I think he had prior children, who were adults at the time, and maybe he didn't include them in the will, or not, they didn't think it was enough money. So, and of course, Anna had a tragic end, and she just had a lot of problems. So having that money didn't really add to her life, and I do believe she came from an unstable background, maybe even financially. I think she was a teenage mother, if I'm not mistaken. So, people in those positions, it doesn't have to make them evil people. I'm sure there were people, I remember at the time when she was with this elderly man and got married to him, and there was a lot of judgment thrown at her for that. And maybe some of it was rightly so, in terms of like, did she exploit him in his vulnerable state? But as we know, it turned out that she was very vulnerable herself. So anyway, the point being that Jupiter in the eighth house can be that you benefit, or a person benefits from other people's money, maybe in the form of an inheritance. And there are, what I would say, unfortunately, cases where people are looking forward to that they're marrying specifically because they know that they will be next in line for that money. And as a matter of fact, I saw something on TikTok where the woman was like dancing in the hospital room and she was a young woman, and she was with this man who was obviously a lot older than her. I think he had hooked up to tubes, and she's dancing. They go, the dance you make when, you're added to the will, or some crazy thing like that. That's like what I'm talking about. So it takes all kinds, because there would be some people, maybe they, even if there's a big age difference, and maybe that person knows that their spouse has more days behind them than ahead of them, but they genuinely care about that person, and they genuinely want that person to be around for a long time. I'm sure that there are cases like that. I'm talking about the more transactional ones. And something, it's a lesson that people have to learn. Like, maybe everything works out, they get that money, and then they have to see how it makes them feel. Like, do they feel good about themselves? Because maybe there are times when they might feel like a little bit guilty, but who knows? If it is a true transactional relationship, they may feel like, hey, I did my part. I, provided whatever that person wanted. And so it was a mutual arrangement. And I want to take this time right now to say that if, for instance, you have if you're in a marriage or a partnership where one person is staying home and taking care of the children, the other one works, that you could say that's like a bit of a transactional relationship, because one of the parties is like the homemaker and the other one's the breadwinner. That to me is not the same, and is not toxic compared to what we're talking about here. That's simply a way to delegate responsibility, because they want to raise the child at home. They don't want to have both parents working and not being there with their child most of the time, or all of the time. Okay, I'm going to bring up Venus in the 8th, but I'm also going to be talking about the Venus aspects to Pluto, including the conjunction, which I think can be more on the challenging side as far as conjunctions go. So Venus in the 8th is like Venus in Scorpio, and is like Venus in conjunction with Pluto, because Pluto is one of the rulers of the 8th house. What is the 8th house? Again, other people's money. Venus is money, but it's also love. Isn't it interesting? Because Venus rules the 2nd house of earned income and the 7th house of relationships. So right there and then, you can see that these themes can get really twisted sometimes. We can get very distorted. Sex, money, and love. And and the 8th house can be sex too. And it can be taboos, So it could be sexual abuse, secrets, So basically, Venus in the 8th house can be, it can be a lot of things, but it might be that idea of there being this distortion when it comes to love and sex. And love and other people, love and other people's money, or sex and other people's money, where a person, and this does happen, like I said, like a woman goes out to eat, a man spends, maybe not if they go to a fast food joint, but maybe he takes her out to a nice restaurant, and then it's like, okay, now what are we going to do? The woman could say, okay, I'm going to call it a night. But she may feel like it's her duty to put out, because it's, it's only fair, he paid for the meal, and that may cause other women to go Dutch, because they don't want to even have that obligation be there. – these kinds of things, or a man gives a woman a wonderful, like an expensive piece of jewelry. Let's say he does it early in the relationship. That could be his way of buying affection or of buying sex. Um, is marriage prostitution. If if a woman gives a man a lot of sex before they get married, and then it's like when she gets what she wants, she doesn't feel like she has to do so anymore. Transactional relationships, do they ever end, or do they just keep going? Do you have to keep holding up your end of the bargain? So, and I know the examples that I'm giving might seem rather old-fashioned to younger people, because who knows, maybe the younger generations have like the opposite occurring. Maybe the women are more financially in control and therefore are using that control to dictate, with a partner what their expectations are. But the bottom line is that all of these, like, and the same thing with the Venus aspects, the square and opposition are the challenging aspects, but even the conjunction can be like that, can be challenging, because love is automatically associated with power, and money may come into it. And so Pluto loves power, and money is a form of power. So that can also be why, so I could even bring up the sign of Scorpio as maybe marrying somebody for money, because they know that that will make them a powerful member of the community. But again, whatever the motivations, the very fact that the person is looking to the other person to provide it is where it becomes problematic, because they're not just seeking it from themselves. They're looking outside of themselves to provide this. And inevitably, somebody can get hurt because they either misunderstood what the arrangement was, or their feelings changed how they viewed the transactional relationship. So anyway, I'm just going to end it there. I just wanted to kind of explore this. If you have stayed through the end, you rock. Thank you for listening. If you'd like a personal reading, you can click on the link below for more information. Take care. Bye.